Okay, imagine this. You land your dream job, right? A company that's like set to change the world, but then you get inside and you find out it's way more complicated, maybe ethically tricky.
Yeah, that's pretty much the core of the journey Sarah Wynne Williams talks about in her book, Careless People.
Yeah.
It's her story from inside Facebook during those really early, massive growth years.
Right.
And she went in, genuinely believing in the good it could do, but then she started seeing the other side, the tough choices, the consequences nobody seemed to be talking about.
Exactly. This isn't some like high level analysis from afar. This is from someone in the room. She saw the culture, how the ideals sometimes clashed with, well, what was actually happening day to day, and the personal side of it too, the toll it takes working in that kind of high pressure place. So if you've ever wondered what really goes on inside one of these huge tech companies that, let's face it, shape so much of our lives, then this conversation is definitely for you. We're going to unpack some of the key moments from her time there.
It really gives you a different perspective on how our digital world gets built.
Okay, so let's start with that initial feeling. Sarah Wynne Williams comes to Facebook, and she's genuinely excited, right?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. She had this background working at the UN, dealing with complex international stuff like treaties on GMOs.
Wow, okay.
And she saw Facebook as this potentially even bigger force, a way to connect billions, do real good on a massive scale. That was the hope, anyway.
But that hope kind of immediately runs into the internal culture, doesn't it?
Instantly. You had this clash between her careful, maybe more considered UN background and Facebook's core mantra at the time, move fast and break things.
Ah, the famous motto.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a slogan on a poster. It was like baked into everything. Speed and growth were everything. Consequences, well, you'd sort of figure those out later.
Maybe.
And you see this clash in some pretty wild stories she tells, like the New Zealand Prime Minister visiting.
Oh, yeah. That one's quite something. She's trying to arrange this formal diplomatic meeting using her experience.
Right, proper protocol. And instead, she's basically told, no, just slide in all these friends of Cheryl. No regard for how things are usually done internationally.
It just shows that disconnect, doesn't it, between like established global ways of working and this very specific tech bubble culture.
Totally. And it wasn't just awkward meetings. Remember the German delegation visit?
Vaguely, yeah. What was that again?
They set up the office space with this kind of unfinished construction theme, meant to be symbolic, edgy maybe.
Okay.
But to these experienced German officials, it just looked like they weren't ready. Disrespectful, even.
Oof. Yeah, that probably didn't land well.
It really shows a kind of, well, maybe a lack of awareness, or just not prioritizing how they were being perceived by these crucial global partners.
And this wasn't just about appearances, was it? It went deeper into the actual projects.
Right. She talks about working on initiatives around organ donation.
Which sounds incredibly important and sensitive.
Exactly. But her experience was that the internal focus seemed tilted towards the data opportunities, the potential user engagement metrics, maybe less on the really careful navigation of the ethical rules, the different laws in different places.
So growth and data were maybe prioritized over the human sensitivity of it all.
It certainly seems that way from her account. The priorities were just different inside the machine.
It makes you think about that whole tech industry pressure, right? The need for constant, rapid growth, often driven by investors.
Definitely. That pressure can easily push the trickier ethical stuff down the list of priorities. That break things idea, well, maybe meant to spur innovation, often meant they were reacting to problems after they happened, not really thinking them through beforehand.
Which brings us to what it was actually like working there day to day. The internal culture she describes sounds intense.
Understatement. Yeah, the book really paints this picture of just relentless work, long hours, constant pressure.
Work just becomes your entire life, basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder how that kind of environment affects people's judgment, their ethical compass.
Well, she gives examples, right? Like being asked to send an email about that organ donation feature.
The megaphone thing, yeah.
That she didn't actually agree with.
Right. That pressure to just toe the company line, even if you have reservations, that's a tough spot.
And it wasn't just policy stuff. She mentions feeling uncomfortable with the big push for Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, and this kind of unspoken expectation that female employees should chip in, do extra work, unpaid to help promote it.
Yeah, that raises questions about, like, whose work is valued and how within that kind of corporate structure.
It also touches on something else interesting, the money disparity.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah.
You had the top leadership becoming incredibly wealthy, billionaires even,
Right.
but many rank-and-file employees, including Sarah, at least initially, were operating on a much different financial level.
She mentioned someone calling themselves an economic volunteer.
Exactly. That phrase really captures it. People were maybe betting on future stock options, but not everyone had that luxury. It highlights the different stakes people had.
And speaking up, challenging things. Did that feel safe?
The book gives the impression it could be risky.
Yeah.
There wasn't maybe a lot of explicit detail on retribution, but there's this undercurrent, a feeling of needing to be careful, being a bit on edge, especially around senior figures like Sheryl Sandberg, whose reactions could apparently be quite unpredictable.
You get hints through others' experiences too, like Debbie Frost.
Right. And that kind of atmosphere where people hesitate to voice concerns. That's how blind spots develop in a company, isn't it? Problems don't get flagged early enough.
Okay, we're a few minutes in now, and this seems like a good moment to quickly say welcome to Audiobook Quiver. If you're enjoying this conversation and want to hear more explorations of fascinating books and the stories behind them, definitely hit that like button, subscribe to the channel.
And ring the notification bell.
Yes, ring the bell so you don't miss out on our future chats. We really appreciate you being here.
Okay, so back to Facebook's ambitions. They weren't just focused internal, obviously. Global expansion was huge. Initiatives like Internet.org were a big part of that.
Right, the idea of connecting people in underserved areas like India and Myanmar were key targets. Sounds noble on the face of it.
It does. Bringing internet access to more people, that's a powerful goal.
Mm.
But the way they did it specifically with zero rating, that stirred up a lot of controversy.
Explain zero rating again quickly.
Basically, it meant providing access to certain websites and services, including Facebook, of course, for free, without using up mobile data.
Okay, so free Facebook, but maybe not free access to everything else online.
Exactly. And that's where the net neutrality arguments came in. Critics said it created a kind of walled garden or a two-tiered internet.
Right, potentially disadvantaging smaller websites or competitors that weren't part of the free package.
Precisely. The situation in India really blew up over this.
TRAI, the telecom regulator there, got involved.
Yeah, and there was significant public pushback. People argued it went against the principle of an open, equal internet where all data is treated the same.
So Facebook saw it as a stepping stone to get people online, but critics saw it as undermining the internet itself.
That's a good way to put it. A real clash of perspectives on what access should mean.
And then moving from regulatory battles to something far darker. Myanmar.
Yeah. Her account really highlights the devastating role Facebook played there.
The spread of misinformation, hate speech, fueling violence against the Rohingya people, it's horrifying.
It really is. It's a brutal example of what can happen when a platform expands incredibly fast into a place with deep existing tensions, without, it seems, enough resources or understanding to manage the content effectively, especially in local languages.
And despite warnings.
The book suggests there were clear warnings, yes, but the response, particularly from leadership, seemed inadequate or slow. It's deeply troubling.
It makes you think about the sheer difficulty these companies face globally, like navigating censorship, government demands in places like China.
Absolutely. The dilemma around storing user data locally in a country like China.
Where it could potentially be accessed by the government for surveillance.
Exactly. It's a massive ethical tightrope.
Hmm.
What compromises are okay just to get access to a huge market?
It pits those stated values, like openness and connection, directly against the realities of operating in authoritarian states.
A fundamental conflict, really.
So let's talk about the leadership she observed. Mark Zuckerberg. Growth seems like his absolute fixation.
That definitely comes across.
Yeah.
But Sarah also notes a kind of evolution, maybe.
How so?
Well, there's that slightly odd anecdote about him almost wanting a riot early on. Maybe not fully grasping the platform's power.
Right.
To a later point where he seemed to have a clear understanding of Facebook's huge political influence. And maybe the responsibilities that came with it.
Probably helped along by all the public scrutiny, I imagine.
You'd think so. The real-world impact became pretty undeniable.
And Sheryl Sandberg. She has this very powerful public image, but Sarah's account suggests the internal reality could be different.
Yeah, the lean-in persona versus some of the described internal behavior exerting power, that demanding environment we mentioned, the unpredictability.
It shows the complexity, I guess, the pressure of being that public face while running such a massive operation.
For sure. Those two things, the public image and the internal reality, aren't always going to align perfectly.
And then there was Joel Kaplan, head of global policy. Sarah paints him as having a very U.S.-centric view.
That's a recurring theme. His approach seemed heavily influenced by U.S. political perspectives and power dynamics.
Maybe not always sensitive enough to local contexts or human rights concerns elsewhere.
That's the impression given, like relying on the U.S. State Department to sort things out rather than deeply engaging with local issues and actors directly. It suggests a certain way of seeing the world primarily through an American lens.
Which can be problematic when you're operating globally.
Hugely. What works or seems acceptable in D.C. might have totally different, maybe harmful consequences somewhere else.
So taken together, what Sarah seems to reveal is this gap, this disconnect between the big mission statement, connect the world, make it open, and the actual decisions being made.
Yeah, especially when those ideals bumped up against things like appeasing governments or, maybe above all, that relentless push for more growth, more users.
The values sometimes took a backseat to the operational realities.
It seems that way. And on Facebook's scale, those contradictions have massive ripple effects. It's a crucial point she makes.
Finally, let's talk about the personal impact on Sarah herself. Her decision to leave wasn't sudden, was it?
No, not at all. The book details the immense personal cost. The stress was clearly enormous.
She mentions health problems, even during pregnancy.
Yes, serious complications.
Yeah.
And she connects that stress, at least partly, to the emotional weight of the ethical conflicts she was witnessing and navigating daily.
That makes sense. It must be incredibly draining to feel like you're part of something you're starting to have serious doubts about.
Absolutely. That growing disillusionment, that feeling that maybe she couldn't make a positive impact from the inside anymore. That's a powerful reason to leave, even a job that looks glamorous from the outside.
Was there a specific turning point for her?
The APEC summit seems to have been really significant. She describes it as revealing some hard truths about Zuckerberg's ultimate ambitions.
Okay.
It sounds like that experience really crystallized her feeling that her own values and vision just didn't align with where the company was truly heading.
One of those moments of clarity, I guess.
Exactly, where the path forward for the organization becomes starkly clear and you realize it's not your path anymore.
And her final experiences just reinforced that, the sense that speaking up wasn't really welcome, the personal cost was too high.
It seems so. It paints a picture of an environment where, for her own well-being and integrity, staying wasn't sustainable.
Which really underlines how important a healthy company culture is, right? Where
Yeah.
people feel safe to raise concerns.
Critically important. If that's missing, you not only risk burning out your people, but the organization itself loses its ethical grounding.
So, looking back at Sarah Wynne Williams' whole account, what are the big takeaways for you?
Well, it really pulls back the curtain on that grand ambition of connecting the world.
Yeah.
You see the messy reality, the ethical compromises, the power struggles inside, and crucially, those huge, often unintended consequences of moving so fast.
Yeah, it really hammers home the immense responsibility these tech giants carry, doesn't it?
It really does. It's not just about code and servers. It's about understanding the deep impact on actual human lives, societies, politics.
And it leaves you with some big questions to chew on. Like, what is the responsibility of these platforms for the stuff shared on them? How do you even navigate a job like that if you feel ethically compromised?
Right. And what does connecting the world really mean if the cost is potentially harming individuals or even democratic processes? What's the right balance?
These are definitely not easy questions.
No simple answers. But Sarah's story gives us such a valuable close-up view of the complexities. It really encourages you to think more critically about it all.
So, what about you listening? What part of Sarah's experience stood out most to you? Did anything surprise you? What questions does it raise? Let us know your thoughts. We genuinely love to hear them.
Yeah, definitely share your reactions.
And of course, if you found this conversation worthwhile, please do give us a like, subscribe to Audiobook Quiver if you haven't already.
And hit that notification bell.
You got it. That way you'll know when we explore another fascinating story. Thanks so much for tuning in.